There is a verdict in the sexual assault retrial of Bill Cosby, and Cosby has been found guilty on all 3 counts, we are told. Jerika Duncan is at the courthouse in Norristown, Pennsylvania. Cosby was charged with 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault of Andrea Constand in January of 2004. And Jerika, I know you've been watching this entire trial. Give us an update.
Now, this happened relatively quickly when you look at what happened with the last trial. It was a hung jury. They could not reach a verdict, and they deliberated for more than 5 days. In this case, the jury started deliberating yesterday around 11 o'clock in the morning. They asked at least 2-3 questions about the consent. What does consent mean? They also wanted statements reread to them made by Andrea Constand, made by Bill Cosby. So there were some questions early on, and that was typical of what we saw in that first trial. But again, they deliberated within the last 2 hours and came to this decision, as you just mentioned, aggravated indecent assault. There were 3 counts. Bill Cosby found guilty on all 3 counts, each count facing up to 10 years behind bars. We imagine his attorneys will appeal this decision, but now we're just waiting for his attorneys to come out, as well as the district attorney, Kevin Steele, and people who have been here in support of Andrea Constand. Remember, there are dozens of women who've made allegations against the comedian and actor who is 80 years old, and 5 of those people were able to testify at this trial. That did not happen at the last trial. They only had 1 witness known as trying to prove prior bad acts was the legal.
We're also joined by Dennis McAndrews on the phone, a well-known attorney in the area who's been following this case very, very closely. Dennis, if you're with me, let me just get your reaction.
Now, the verdict, as it's been reported, is guilty of all 3 counts, correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
Yes. That is obviously the result of extraordinary work on the part of the prosecution. This was an extremely difficult case from a prosecutorial perspective. The inconsistencies that plagued them in the first trial did not go away in the second trial. The issue of the large monetary settlement that she received was something that the defense used to call her a con artist, to call her a pathological liar. They threw every conceivable issue possible at this case, including the statute of limitations. So there was a huge amount of information for this jury to pour through. And for the prosecution to have prevailed is really a fairly extraordinary result, even with the other women, because their allegations were very old. They had not been reported to the police, and so it's a significant prosecution victory.
You mentioned the others, so 5 other women were allowed to testify at this trial who were not allowed to testify at the previous trial. This trial in particular, Dennis, as you know, there were 12 days of testimony this time, but then jurors just started deliberating at 11 a.m. Yesterday. So, I mean, there are a lot of differences in these 2 cases, one of which is the amount of time that jurors deliberated. Obviously, a different result in this one as well. How much do you read into how much time they took to deliberate, and also some of the questions that they asked both last night and this morning?
Yeah. I think in terms of the questions, it showed that there were a number of jurors who really were thinking hard and really had not made up their mind and needed some refreshment in terms of the critical parts of the evidence to decide which way they were going to go. In terms of the length of deliberation, I think from a practical perspective, it's important to remember that this case, even though it was long and it was complicated and had a great deal of testimony, it involved a criminal act that took about 5 minutes. And there was one fundamental question. Did she agree to let a man who was the age of her grandfather to engage in sexual contact with her? And the jury had to look at themselves in the mirror and say, despite every inconsistency and despite the money, does this make sense? Would she really have permitted to do that, him to do that? And apparently their answer was no. She would not have consented to that.
Well. MeToo has finally claimed its first victim in court, who's basically its first victim in court, which is Bill Cosby. Now, 5 years ago, this would not have been a case, but under this current climate, MeToo frenzy, it has become where scandal and hearsay is probably more important than facts, which is just the zeitgeist or the signs of our time. It's long been held that women sleep to the top. That's been one avenue where you don't have enough talent or enough moxie or enough money. Women can use their sexuality as a currency. Now, normally this kind of stuff, if you didn't report it then, it wouldn't be a crime. You couldn't go back 5, 10, 15, 20 years later when there's no evidence and nothing was reported and actually say that you were raped or say that you were sexually assaulted. Used to be only murder or something similar had no statutes of limitations. But laws are made to be broken and rules are made to be changed to fit the society, and that is the society that we live in nowadays. Just as the OJ trial changed male and female interaction forever, I think the Bill Cosby trial, or this particular trial of the century, as we want to call it, which OJ in the 20th century was the trial of the century, is going to be a landmark case. And going forward, men are going to have to be extremely cautious about the women that they sleep with or under the conditions that they sleep with them. You cannot assume that consent is given. It's going to have to almost be recorded, which is probably a good thing. Perhaps this loose sexuality that's been going on in the United States for the past, I would say, 80 years, since World War II, which they say is the reason that a lot of this no-fault divorce and single motherhood actually started, was because a lot of these women were getting pregnant while their husbands were overseas fighting wars. And they needed to free women from the boundaries of the marital contract or even the bounds of out of wedlock children. And I think Me Too is going to carry it a step forward. I think Me Too is a reactionary position. Women think that they're being protected and they're being freed, and I do think it's actually going to be the opposite. I think the backlash from Me Too is actually going to be separation rather than integration between men and women. But we're going to have to see how this case affects things going forward. If it's any indication, after O.J. Simpson, the O.J. Simpson trial, the Violence Against Women Act actually got so extreme to where men and women almost couldn't live together anymore, where a simple accusation by a woman could put a man in jail for domestic violence, which is nothing compared to what this sexual assault trial could be, or a sexual assault case could be. You know, at best, a domestic abuse would land you with a month in jail, 30 days in jail, and maybe a year probation and then some anger management. With sexual assault, it can wind you up in prison for up to 10 years just on a mere accusation. And that's basically all this is. A woman or accused Bill Cosby of sexually assaulting her or basically doping her. Now, Bill Cosby says that she consented on taking the drugs. She consented to have sex with him. And what any movement like this needs is a landmark case, which is a conviction in a jury trial to where it will set legal precedents. And perhaps legal precedence has been set. Exactly what the Me Too women are actually looking for, which is what's making the second wave feminists cringe, because they know what the backlash will be. Everything in the universe is not one way. There's an action and there's a reaction. The laws of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I do believe that Me Too is going to get their wish, or get what we call unintended consequences. That they will absolutely get an opposite and equal reaction. We found that out with the Hollywood case. We found that out with the workplace cases, where men refused to work with women. Men refused to be alone with women in the office. Men started refusing to work around women. And I think with the OJ case, it's going to get even worse. I think the bar scene is probably going to be dead within a year. The so-called ladies' night, all it's going to take is a couple of cases. And once you get some case trial precedent in a couple of states, it's going to ripple across, and some legislator is going to stand up in the middle of Congress or state Congress and start demanding stricter laws against sexual assault and Me Too. To where just to have sex, you're going to need a signed contract and video. And even then, it's going to be your word against hers. I always say the no means no was a referendum against what the so-called non-selective beta males. And the yes means yes was a referendum against the alpha males. So that an alpha male or a ladies' man who's got 10, 15, 20 conquests, or even hundreds of conquests in his lifetime, now he has to go back 5, 10, 15, even 20 years back into his past and just hope that one of these one-night stands don't pop back up to haunt him, or that some crazy woman in his past doesn't find him on Facebook and come up with an accusation that's going to land him in jail, or maybe even cost him thousands of dollars in lawyer fees just to fend off a defense, or even come back and blackmail one of these masters of the universe for hundreds of thousands of dollars just to stay out of prison. I said last year that Me Too was going to be MGTOW or IBMOR's greatest hashtag, because MGTOW is going to be the end of female privilege. Why do I say that? Because a woman's greatest asset is her sexuality and her body. And if you take that away, then it's just the content of her character and her ability. She's going to have to compete on equal footing with her male counterparts. And just as anything else in any war or any battle, there's going to be casualties. Some men are going to take some hits. Hopefully not too bad. Hopefully Bill Cosby himself doesn't have to go to prison for very long, or Harvey Weinstein doesn't have to go to prison for very long. But men are going to take some hits. But in the end, the biggest losers will be women, because the risk is going to be too great to trick, too great to date, too great to show up at a bar and take some drunk chick home and have sex with her. The bar scene is already drying up. The online dating scene is going to dry up, because if you don't know that person over a very long period of time, it's going to be extremely risky to have sex with that woman. If you don't have a track record of texts, of interactions, of dates, whatever, it's going to be extremely, extremely hard to prove that you didn't assault that woman. And I do believe, even if you have dated her, there's going to be some question, if she gets angry, that you drugged or assaulted her. So, MGTOW brothers, take heart. MGTOW and anti-Me Too now has a face. And Bill Cosby may become your patron saint. Time will tell. History will be my judge, as always. But if the tea leaves are lining up, I would say that for American women, Sharia law is probably in your future, and more than likely your near future. As oft quoted, may you live in interesting times. And another famous quote, be careful for what you wish for, because you just might get it. And there is no better or more deserving people than third wave feminists. With that, brothers, I'm going to jump off of here. This is BGS out, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.